here we are. Welcome to the, I don't know, maybe 40th session of the Brain of the Firm reading group with General Intellect Unit. This time we're picking up at the bottom of page 366, getting to section 3, transducers neither attenuate nor amplify variety. Let's roll. The transduction role has already been mentioned several times in examining the crisis would-be regulator. It is worth a reminder that transducers come into action whenever information has to be encoded or decoded in the course of crossing a boundary in the system, and that a properly designed transducer will have no effect on the richness of variety transduced. In fact, each of the transducers, solid black dots, so far considered, has failed this test of good design. And the group of them next to be discussed, which is not designed at all in a free society, seems to be responsible for the problems enunciated at the end of the last section. The members of the group are marked on figure 49 as T1, T2, T3, and T4. So let's pause for a moment and go back to figure 49 on page 363. So T1 is exiting the regulator and heading towards the output. T2 is then transducing the action from the output back into system A. T3 is transducing on the same line into system B, and then T4 onto system C. So those are each of the transducers on the outward part of the reflex arc after the anastomotic reticulum has processed things and it's kicking back out into the world. Okay, we've got some hot miking from Mr. Carol Neurath. I think I'll just mute. There we go. That's fine. There we go. Okay, back to the text. Trouble begins when information is transduced into the feedback circuit at T1. Now this transducer, which controls the conceptual model housed in the feedback function f of a, is in the past, even 50 years ago, or was in the past, even 50 years ago, designed as part of the diplomatic regulator. It probably did preserve the variety carried in the forward transmission, and perhaps it even protected the total crisis regulator against noise in the input as it is supposed, controlled theoretically, to do. But now, as has been said, it appears to have been superseded by a T1 supplied by the mass media. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the reaction time of the media is so short that the putatively designed diplomatic element does not have time to take the initiative. Such an hypothesis would account for a role reversal, whose general acceptance seems even stranger than its general appearance in the West, as will shortly be examined. So just pausing there for a moment, this is a really interesting thing, because today, which is 22nd of January 2021, in Britain, we had Boris Johnson did a little stand-up sort of press release sort of thing, saying that the new variant of the coronavirus seems to actually be more lethal as well as being more transmissible. But that was leaked like an hour beforehand by the fucking media. So Twitter was already lit up by the time the words actually got out of anyone's mouth. And so, yeah, it's a hell of a reversal, right? The sheer speed of mass media, which I mean, Stafford couldn't have even imagined this social media stuff being even faster again. The sheer velocity means that whatever attempt at regulation comes from the diplomatic sectors is kind of irrelevant, because the transduction is happening somewhere else already. Any remarks on this bit?
I thought, so maybe I'm just with figure 49 is, I thought T2, 3, like T3 and T4 were points kind of along the like feedback loop, where they intersect with the, like, the T2 is where the feedback intersects with A, and T3 with B and T4 with C, but not that they were necessarily like isolated to those systems, if that makes sense, or maybe I'm...
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. So the way I read the diagram is that at the like output of the regulator, when it's acting back on the world, so T1 is not transducing onto the like action that kicks back onto the world. Actually, I think I misread that. T1 is transducing the feedback circuit. It's the dotted line that's going down and to the left on the diagram. That's where T1 is kicking off. So if you look from the word input all the way to the right to output, that's the forward circuit. And then from T1 back to comp through uppercase F of A is the feedback circuit. So this is the regulator's internal transduction of feedback information. So for analogy to like a homeostat or a thermostat, if you can imagine a thermostat that was like quite sensitive to external stuff but wasn't able to read its own temperature very well, like, or it's if it had like hundredths of a degree of sensitivity on its like heat sensors and its like ability to control the heater element as well, but internally in its feedback loop it only had like 4 bits to represent the amount of correction to apply, that would be a degenerated T1, that the transduction into the feedback loop would not be good enough. And you can then imagine that because it's internally impoverished, it would actually not be able to regulate the temperature very well at all. So that's what we're talking about for T1. But then T2, 3, and 4 are transducing the action back onto the environment, or the various environments. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think so. Cool. Maybe we just keep going and then it'll make a little more sense.
Okay, cool. At any rate, it seems in practice impossible to separate within the compass of the crisis regulator, whose structure we are attempting to understand, diplomatic transduction from that of the mass media, because each seeks to outwit and preempt the other. Or so it appears to the public, and therefore to the astute politician, whether she or he is personally confused by the entanglement or not. For example, statements made by foreign governments or by foreign embassies involved in crisis are habitually anticipated by the media in advance. Exactly, like what I was on about earlier. Whereupon they exert part of their effect before they are emphatically not made, because they cannot be unmade by a denial. So just to go over that again. For example, statements made by foreign governments or by foreign embassies involved in crisis are habitually anticipated by the media in advance, whereupon they exert part of their effect before they are emphatically not made, because they cannot be unmade by a denial. Nor is this to do with the speed of response alone, but also with its format, that is to say, with the unsurprising dominance of the media by television. It is worth recalling that the process of the waking brain devote unparalleled activity to visual input, as evidenced by the vast variety capacity at and behind the retina, along the optic nerve and within the occipital lobe of the cortex. Socially, too, the amazing proportion of time devoted to viewing broadcasts by the average citizen must assuredly lead to an acceptance of the variety structure of editorial viewpoint. Views themselves are commonly contested, that is true, and this is taken to be a sign of a free society. But both the richness and connectivity of variety transduced by T1 will necessarily inform the conceptual model housed in the feedback function uppercase F of A, thereby not only making it impossible to register the great new truth, but forcing the practical politician to work within a variety impoverished model imposed on him or her. And woe betide that politician who tries to amplify variety at this point. Answers drawn from a richer variety source must sound and look evasive, or blinding with the science, or daft, but in any case they will be incomprehensible. This seems the sufficiently clear reason why politicians are led away from honest inquiry in public utterance and towards the naive appeal to good sense and so forth. They must work within the available variety structure and rely on charisma to generate bogus variety of the kind earlier discussed. Ooh, wow! What a little paragraph. That's a real corker. Something that jumps at me is this thing that, even if either the media or the diplomats try to transduce the variety of the situation accurately, it comes across as hedging and waffling, which may in fact well be an accurate representation of the thing. It's quite complex, Syria is a land of contrasts or whatever. Which of course it is, but that comes across as bullshit because of the structure of the spectacular cognitive apparatus and the kind of ambient way that we're all transducing feedback through this kind of media channels. But then if they're savvy enough, they'll realize this is the case, that you just can't tell people the truth about what's going on, because it'll come across as incomprehensible anyway. So it has to be impoverished, and then has to be injected with charisma to make it seem like it's more of a full signal. And then in a different register, I think you have, like, especially with, like, you know, the social media stuff, you have, like, the structure of these feedback channels is such that, like, they have their own incentives built in. Like, Facebook is incentivized to propagate information that gets the better clicks, not that which is, like, actually better for social regulation. And so that's its own kind of derangement as well. Anyway, let's see, Matt.
Yeah, the stuff about, like, political interviews makes you think of like Syntegration as a contrast of just where, like, you know, you really actually do, you know, kind of get to, like, the topics that you want to get to, you know, maybe, like, in the depth that you want, and also just, yeah, like how you know, it's something that I think is actually advantageous about, like, asynchronous, like, ways of communicating. And, yeah, I mean, they understood this, like, when video first became a thing, where like, you know, with editing, like, you know, you can basically control how people, like, perceive something versus, like, you know, like, you know, when you're consuming text, you know, you can jump around and, you know, like, you don't necessarily have, like, the exact emotional response that the author, you know, wanted you to have, because, like, they don't get to control that, you know, now you're going to experience this and then you're going to experience this right after. And yeah, in terms of, like, communication channels, I think there really is something to, yeah, like, stuff, you know, where you can hop around, you know, text or you know, hypertext of some sort or another, you know, versus, like, video, because yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of cases where, you know, like what exactly does a politician not being quick enough on their feet, you know, to answer a clever question, what does that actually tell you? That doesn't necessarily tell you anything about substance. I mean, it might, but I mean, you know, it might just say, you know, like they weren't quick on the draw in that moment.
Mm-hmm. It's a very human condition. I guess the manipulation by editing is like that Simpsons bit where they absolutely butcher an interview with Homer, so he's just saying huge ass or whatever, and it's, like, obviously cut in weird ways to make him look ridiculous. But yeah, so it's totally a thing that happens, right? Oh, I had another thought, but it flew away. Jeremy, and then Jake.
I muted you.
In the USA, we have Fox News, and then the hangers-on who are even worse, like Newsmax and OAN. And having these 24-hour news channels that are basically right-wing propaganda, they create this feedback circuit where they have to get crazier and crazier and crazier as this loop happens in order to stay whatever the hell version of relevant they are. They have to speed up the process, with the result being you have news channels denying the results of the election and, you know, goading people into terror. That's pretty much out of control at this point. I watched a video from the actual January 6th attacks where these people had microphones, and the microphones had the little boxy thing that tells you where the news source is from, and they carried three with them. They carried CNN, Fox News, and OAN. And as the crowd got more violent, it wasn't safe to be a CNN reporter anymore. So they had to hide that and switch to Fox News. And then as the crowd got more violent, they turned on Fox News because Fox News was willing to admit the election was over and had to switch to OAN. So you get these, you know, this, the way the feedback function works is very much exacerbated by a lunatic fringe media that hugs close to a lunatic fringe electorate, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. That's similar to the thought I just had, and you've reminded me about that. Like, a lot of this stuff, both with, like, the 24-hour news cycles and with social media, kind of seems a lot like the kind of electrical storm that goes on inside a muscle in spasm. That, like, it's just random electrical pulses in every direction, or like a kind of So like is this like computerized social sphere? Is it a high variety cybernetic kind of social regulator, or is it more like a kind of social epilepsy or something where it's just, or like a social like leg cramp where it's just blasting signals in all directions, and like they're fast enough that the feed the thing from earlier in the book that like a sufficiently strong feedback loop will run away with itself, and it has more causal power than anything else near it does, like any of the other components do. So these feedback circuits are what's actually driving the action, and they're running fast and wild. Let's see, Jake.
This whole thing is very interesting. I think, I like that he's sort of talking about, or maybe this is just what I'm reading into it, I guess, of the the way in which the particulars of media, in this case television media, like not necessarily conditions but reinforces and streamlines particular ways of absorbing the information and absorbing things that you wouldn't have gotten that from text. I'm just thinking to the Nixon, Kennedy debates that were the first televised debates, and people were like, oh shit, this Nixon looks like a monster and Kennedy looks smart, so we should vote for him, or whatever. It's like that kind of thing that introduces new information that might not be, like someone said, might not be actually relevant to the reason that you're absorbing this, right? Being able to answer a question very wittily on the spot isn't necessarily an indicator of someone being a good head of the school board or something, but your brain absorbs that and it provides some feedback that you might not even be conscious of if you're not really thinking about this stuff. And then the part about the making it impossible to register the great new truth. It's the way in which the information is conveyed limits or it puts constraints on the information itself, the channels that are used. And if it's going through the same old channels, right, the well-worn channels of mass media or whatever, then it cuts off these things, not just particular information, but I don't know, maybe different ways of seeing the world, or just that kind of thing of you can't say it's a really complicated system and there's people who have good intentions but wrong ideas on both sides, and people who have bad intentions but good ideas on both sides, and it's you can't really say that you can't say that on a Fox news or any other mass media news debate style, where you have 30 seconds to answer a thing, because the channel for it isn't, and not the TV channel, but literally the method for it just doesn't allow for that kind of communication, because it'll get garbled and mixed up with all the other ways in which someone not being as eloquent on the spot conveys particular information that gets mixed up with the actual information, if that makes sense.
No, certainly. I think maybe a slightly different kind of flavor of the same thing for this little section, that the connectivity and richness of the transducer at T1 will inform and shape the conceptual model housed in the feedback function, is also that in this environment with Facebook and Twitter basically work on outrage. It means that any truth in the world or in an emerging situation that cannot be communicated in terms of outrage won't be communicated. It just won't propagate. It won't. The channel has its own shape. That it has ID it was a little square tube, and you put little cubes down it. It works perfectly. But if you try to put a triangle in there, it's not going to work. So this is two different registers where it's there's the sort of conscious or one-to-one communications of somebody not having time to respond properly on a live television broadcast, but then there's this like the distributed kind of social feedback process that is distorted and kind of narrowed in a weird way and accelerated, so that you get this kind of social feedback faster and faster, but it's worse and worse, and it can only communicate certain kinds of facts, the ones that are outrageous enough to make these like Twitter headlines.
Right. I mean, it's its own feedback loop, such that you get things like someone tweeting something and including a particular word or way of spelling that is signaling to people who are always on Twitter, and then that spins out into the new Twitter like outrage or interest of the day kind of thing. It's like, but it's like this person did not at all intend for any of this to happen, but because they, communicated this idea they had in the wrong way, it turns into something that they completely didn't intend and is so far from the actual meaning that they meant to include that.
Mm-hmm. But hey, that's our social feedback function for us right now. Okay, let's press on a tiny bit. It is from the perversion of the feedback loop, its transduction at T1, its conceptual modeling and consequential transformation at F of A, and its ultimate dominance of the forward process that leads to action by a decreasingly adequate variety structure that the disasters derive. First comes the role reversal in governance. Predictably and observably, politicians are compelled to offer instant response to burgeoning crisis in terms of a variety impoverished model for propagation through a regulatory system that does not exhibit requisite variety. They seek to create extra variety by hectoring, but the variety is bogus, and unless they are extremely astute, they are made to look silly. For at this point, the investigative journalists, in quotes, and then in parentheses, unelected, unaccountable, close parentheses, who have foisted the impoverished variety structure of the feedback function onto the public in the first place, assume the watchdog role of keeper of the public conscience, a role in which the elected accountable, again those are in parentheses, politician was originally cast. So a kind of fun inversion, right? The supposed custodians of the public are not able to really operate in this sort of way, and then the sort of media itself. In Stafford's case, he's using the term journalists, but I think we can then abstract to the kind of horrifying machine intelligences that live at Facebook that act as journalists now. Assume the role of the public conscience and the guardians of the public. Jeremy.
If you get a chance, watch it on YouTube. There's a press conference that Bob Dylan did in 1965 in December that was an hour long on the local NPR affiliate KQED. And it's an absolute master class in having higher variety than your interviewers, where you have people like Time Magazine and Newsweek and the New York Times trying to turn Bob Dylan into what they think Bob Dylan is. And Bob Dylan, being the consummate trickster god, just flies all over it in all kinds of different directions. And it's absolutely stunning to watch, where they cannot encapsulate him, and then they get maddened by their inability to encapsulate him in the middle of a press conference that he utterly dominates and controls. His OODA loop is just spinning like crazy, and they cannot keep up, and it's just an incredible thing to watch. And it's worth the entire hour to watch it, even if you're not a Bob Dylan fan. There's stuff like, they were like, are you going to join in the Vietnam protests that are going on? Are you going to be part of the demonstrations? And he's like, well, I got my own demonstrations. And they're like, well, what kind of demonstrations? He's like, well, I'm going to march with a placard with a picture of a chair on it. And they're like, why a chair? They're like, I don't know. It could be a house or a mouse, potatoes, plates. We can do all kinds of things. We got things to demonstrate. And it's like, you can tell they're getting maddened and baffled and all that kind of stuff. It's something that the Situationists understood in Paris 68. The American yippies and other kinds of groups did not do quite as well, but that the ability to subvert that encapsulation, we really do need better classes in it, because we haven't really performed like that on the left in a while. And it is one of the tools in our toolkit that we've really neglected.
Oh yeah, I think so. There's something similar, I think, with a Frank Zappa interview when he was on TV, where I think that the interviewers it was something about like, oh, isn't pornography terrible or whatever, and they had a line, but Frank just waltzes around them, and he completely runs circles around them by not. He doesn't play into the role they think he's going to, and he completely subverts them with all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it's maybe similar to this problem that I think Marx identifies in the Brumaire, where like progressively, like, you know, socialism gets walked down from like the Republic of Labor and Virtue down to like filling in the potholes is socialism, or when the state sends you to prison, that's socialism. But then socialists kind of double down on that. You know, it's like they sort of end up being the bogeymen that they're accused of being in some ways, or like kind of, and we do it all the fucking time, right? Like, oh, well, you know, some reactionaries going on. It's like, no, socialism really is when your employer just gives you free dental or whatever, because it's like it's an easier fallback than it is to do the Bob Dylan or the Frank Zappa act and kind of walk around them.
Yeah, there's a part, someone asks him a stupid question, and he just says, "Would you ask the Beatles that?" And just shuts down the whole line of questioning, you know?
Yeah. Let's have Matt and then Kyle.
Yeah, and I think it, you know, poses interesting questions on two ends. You know, like, one is that, you know, like these channels are very deeply unideal, like for, you know, collective decision making, and, you know, we should try to find better ones that, you know, take full advantage of, you know, like all the crazy digital technologies that we have, and ways to and, you know, like you know, decades and decades of, you know, social science and you know, just little things to, you know, make things about like actual like decision making and actual information transfer. And the flip side is that, you know, like maybe we should be a lot more like deliberate in terms of how, you know, understanding like the limitations of you know, of interacting with media, and just understand that, you know, no, like this isn't like a thing where, you know, a conversation with a reporter or something, you know, like the truth will, you know, rise up. Well, no, I mean, you know, talking, you know, dealing with that channel that's shaped that way is a skill, and not everyone has it. And, you know, like I do think actually, you know, New York DSA has actually been pretty good about you know, only have you know, people who have signed up for and are skilled at talking to the media to talk to the media, and yeah, I think just understanding that, you know, certain roles, that actually is part of the job. You know, I mean, the flip side of what I was saying before about, you know, how maybe it's a bad selection mechanism. Well, I mean, you know, you can be involved in policy, you can be involved in organizing, you can be involved in you know, doing politics stuff without talking to the media, and some jobs actually, you know, that actually is part of the job.
Right. You kind of stay away from them, because like if you talk to them, and I think this is probably something that the Corbyn crowd kind of discovered as well, is that like any kind of attempt to engage with that fuck, what they do is they pull the classic like, when did you stop beating your wife trick, where there's no good answer to it, and whichever way, like they've got you circled. And it's something that, like, I think the Momentum folks never really kind of understood, is like just how vicious the right media were going to be, and how trying to engage in good faith was a huge kind of mistake. And like maybe a lesson to learn there is to just like disengage. Don't even fucking try. Don't try to go on, you know, their morning shows or anything like that. Don't try to do interviews in their fucking papers. Just keep control of your own narrative. Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, the point that Beer brings up about investigative journalism is interesting, because we often see today that the loss of investigative journalism is widely lamented because of the nature of funding structures that have changed due to the rise of you know, Google and Facebook as the arbiters of news, and the death of local newspapers to a large extent, and you know, the hollowing out of news bureaus, and so generally investigative journalism is seen in quite a positive light these days, and that kind of goes back to, either the muckrakers or the period in the late 70s into the very early 80s when the influence of Watergate and Vietnam meant that there was some degree of critical faculty in journalism. Unfortunately, this is very much not the norm in journalism. And people who speak truth to power in journalism tend to be destroyed utterly in their careers, just run out of the business. Or you have something like investigative journalism on the order of the Panama Papers, which just goes absolutely nowhere. So I think what Beer's talking about when he talks about investigative journalism, it really brings to mind much more for me something like the Drudge Report during the Clinton era, right? This just, absolute opportunist who is just there to follow any lead he can and create any degree of sensationalism he can, which, sort of lays the groundwork for future hack journalism. Maybe that's more what Beer has in mind, but it is very interesting that he goes up against this term of investigative journalism as being unelected and therefore invalid when this is something that we kind of worship these days.
Well, I think it's in part a combination of Beer's kind of general faith in the sort of institutions of democracy or whatever, plus also like in the Chilean context, he's kind of dealing with what he thinks of as a sort of a government that has popular assent and is like properly democratic and such. And then you have the fucking vipers back at the BBC, taking stabs at the effort and such. So it's because like I think we'd all say that like investigative journalists that goes up against shitty, corrupt, bad politics that we know is probably good. But like I think Beer's kind of thing is the other way around. It's like if you have some faith that these are democratic institutions, or even like future democratic institutions, like the ones we're hoping to build, these fucking vipers will be out to get us too, right? We'll have a Drudge Report that's after us, and they'll use the investigative journalist cachet, the fucking fumes from Watergate to justify their attacks on worker democracy, right? That's how that's going to play out. And like you'll have these like popular, democratic institutions being pitted against completely unelected shit stirrers who are opportunists, That's certainly going to be a thing we need to look out for. And look out for the fact that they'll try to defend themselves in terms of like, well, I'm just saying it like it is, or I'm just helping the people to know the truth, man, about your unionizing effort, right? Anyway, who have we got? Jake.
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. It's about. I feel like that it. And obviously Beer's talked about this a lot, right? The lack of requisite variety in the systems that regulate this sort of thing or supposedly regulate the sort of thing. I mean, you could. That's obvious to anyone who hasn't read Beer, that like the regulations on like in journalism or anything are like so out of whack at this point. Even compared to what they used to be. But I think that also like. The fact that we've got these new technologies, right? And I'm thinking about like from chapter 1 or 2 of that like graph he posted that he put that were those like the different like the logarithmic kind of scale of like increasing technology and or like increasing change or whatever. Just like that in terms of media and the fact that like all of our systems are so not like designed to deal with that or to consider what effects that might have, and it's just like these legacy systems trying to play catch up, but they can never do it. And I think it really shows that we just need new ways of thinking about how this will be done in a way. And I mean, I don't know, just kind of makes me think a lot about like what are the best ways to do this. And like how do we get some kind of truth out of some kind of reporting in a way that's not reliant on like what is clearly a failed system and a system that's just not up to the task of our reality. I think, social media kind of tries to fill that gap, and it fills it in a sense, right? That it has the requisite variety to like handle the massive amount of people that are experiencing things that want to share those things with people, which like traditional media was not, but it allowed for much more controlled outflow of what was happening. And so now it's like, well, we can't, rely on like, we just need good investigative journalists. We just need this socialist newspaper that's doing local reporting. It's like, no, it's not gonna like inform people about what's going on and what like is necessary to do in a way that may have done at the sort of turn of the 20th century, because there wasn't all these other channels by which things could be expressed. But also you can't just use these existing like social media channels, because for all the reasons that we talked about, of like by the way that they are designed and the way that they're operated and run, like for ad revenue and that sort of thing, like means they're tailored not towards, exposing some kind of truth or anything. It's just, like you said, like it's tailored towards getting clicks or to outrage or to generating comments, like in the case of Twitter or something, and not as much on like increasing the amount of information that the reader gets or viewer gets or whatever. So I certainly don't know what the answer is, but like, I don't know, something with using those tools or using those techniques, right? Using some kind of like technological methods, but like not in the way that they're designed now. I don't know what it is, but
I think this may be related to a thing I think I talked about probably a good couple of sessions ago, but like when the scumbags come after you and they try to smear people that are involved in the thing, or they try to paint your thing, or I mean like even from the recent years, like Corbyn fucks dogs or whatever. The way to counter that is, and the way to not have proletarians just instinctively think, that sounds like a thing that could be true, is to have them organized in such a way and like that they know each other and they instinctively know it's horseshit, so that when they say like, oh well, the new union for the Amazon workers is actually a hive of abuse or something, it's like, we know that's not the case or whatever. It's like, that's the kind of resistance you get to that, which I think you're right that like simply doing another socialist newsletter or God forbid another fucking podcast is kind of just playing the game by the existing rules and isn't really challenging it, because it's not building proletarians like a capacity to process the world themselves and with each other, rather than having it be received simply through these channels. So you need to build that kind of instinctive, like that when they deploy the nonsense, or this is inoculation as well, right? The thing we've been talking about, that like when the enemy deploys this nonsense against you, you kind of have to have people be immune to it, and that requires organization and getting people on the same page. Okay, let's crack on a small bit. Well, however penetrating or otherwise this commentary may be, it seems to be a cybernetic fact that the central feedback system of Figure 49 is not going to function as a dampening device. It will accelerate explosion if we are not extremely careful. Then, if role reversal in governance is the first effect, which is, despite its general applicability, cybernetically bizarre, the final effect is probably war. This is as true of the processes within the family as it is of the human condition at large, as true within the firm as it is within the nation. Folk are fearful that this will be the outcome because of the violence and belligerence that they see all around them, especially on television. Their explanations for it are mediated through the low variety structures that are to hand. And because those structures are cybernetically incompetent, the explanations feed the fear and thereby exacerbate the risk. All this is said of the transducer T1. Perhaps then, equivalently lengthy analyses will be needed to account for the performance of transducers T2, T3, and T4 in Figure 49. There are two answers to this expectation. These three transducers govern the decoding of action information into the phase spaces of the three parties of the crisis, respectively A, B, and C. Since we have not attempted to say precisely what unites these parties in their common intersect, the hatched area, where the crisis has germinated, or what divides them, each and severally, according to the diagram, they have the same cybernetic status. Each owns a dedicated phase space transducer, and its coding facility depends firstly on the distinctive qualities of the party serviced. However, they are all alike in sharing the action input to the crisis determined by the output of the regulatory system so far discussed. It is in this respect that they are of such major interest. The detailed information encoded and decoded by each of these transducers will heavily depend on the subtlety of the languages available to parties A, B, and C. But the variety transduced, which may be attenuated or spuriously amplified by NET, is that variety, and only that variety, preserved at the output stage of the servo mechanism recently described. Nuance can be projected into a sufficiently subtle language, but only if the variety is built into the transducer that will service the whole range of nuances from which this nuance is selected. It is this fact that makes it unnecessary to distinguish between the transducers T2, T3, and T4. But doubtless the second expectation was that this little set is markedly different from the feedback transducer T1, to which so much attention has been devoted, because it sits in the field of affairs close to the crisis domain, whereas T1 is part of the regulatory feedback loop that belongs to party A. This is an incorrect reading because the whole system is closed. T2, T3, T4, and T1 belong to the same circuit that is closed through the crisis, as in figure 48. Hence, over a period of time, and whatever information may be flowing around this circuit, and transducing into whatever languages at whichever points, the variety of T1 and T2 and T3 and T4 will tend to equate. This is due to systemic entropy. The negentropy that would be needed to offset this tendency is unrelated to the data flow within the servo mechanism and its transduction into crisis-related information. It is related to the information that distinguishes requisite variety in the conceptual models. Once this is clearly perceived, it will be apparent to the remaining transducers on the circuit already discussed. It will be apparent that the remaining transducers on the circuit already discussed belong to the group as well. Thus we have cohesion, a pleasing solidarity, if you will, on behalf of all components to constitute a unitary system. As constituted, however, it has a fatal flaw. I think we need to go on a little bit more then. Variety, like any other constructive variable in our universe, tends to leak away unless it is specifically boosted, like a charge on a capacitor. This leakage should be expected to destroy complexity and effective organization, inducing impotence for survival and on a negatively exponential curve. Quite soon, therefore, there may be only one bit of uncertainty left in any crisis. We have met exactly this situation before in a more sanguine context. It was in Chapter 14, where the multinode was in charge of such a process, deliberately contrived and intended as an aid to control decision. In the current analysis, responsibility has been abdicated to an accelerating feedback loop, and the power to decide has been lost to caprice. When the last bit of uncertainty vanishes in any crisis, whether by change of, I think that's supposed to be or, whether by change or by intervention of God or devil, the die is cast. The outcome is success or failure, life or death, peace or war, survival or annihilation, depending on the system concerned. It is pity indeed that humankind might lose its prerogative to intervene, simply through a failure to understand the cybernetics of the system. Pity to entertain so strange a fate because of its own prowess in the speed and the slickness of global communication. The picture, even so, becomes yet more complicated, yet more disturbing in its final phase. Oh boy, that's a hell of a page. Let's see, what remarks do we have on this?
Yeah, that was a lot. So I maybe I'm just like, I don't know how like cohesive my thoughts are here, but I definitely get that like last paragraph, I think, where, you know, it's like at some point you gotta come down to like, do you make this decision or do you not? Like, do you, put this out there or not put it out there? Do you like make this move of like, putting resources towards some end or do you not? Like at some point you do have to make a decision. You can only like put it back through the like decision making or like contemplative channels so many times before it loses all the nuance and just turns into like, do we do this or do we not? Like, let's just put up our shut up, and I think that is for sure it's for sure a concern. I am trying to understand the paragraph before that, and it is a little, this whole thing is very dense, right? But yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll just shut up and like hop back on after some other people have said something.
Yeah, I think I don't quite get what he's getting at with the sort of why the circuit. I think, I take it at a high level. The circuit is closed. It's a circuit that converges on variety being lost from the regulator and variety proliferating in the environment, and so it just converges on catastrophe. But I'm not totally sure I follow his explanation for why that's the case. Jeremy?
This idea that in a crisis, the variety has a negative exponential curve going down. You can see this in historical situations in which there was a protracted crisis. If you look at, who constituted the elements that were behind the October Revolution. You have the classic story we hear is the Bolsheviks did it. But actually, it was the Bolsheviks, the left SRs, a fair number of Menshevik internationalists, various nationalist parties, a lot of the more left-leaning Muslim groups, various different Central Asian groups. There's a lot of variety in the revolution. But in the course of the crisis, the revolution got less and less and less variety as it was beset by more and more chaos in the environment until finally you have a ban on factions. It's like you can see that curve there. And the same way with like the Black Panthers, where it went from the glorious black radical imagination, health clinics and cities and free breakfast for kids, to how the hell do we get to Algeria in 5 years? Like how many of our brothers can we get to Algeria? How many people can we break out of prison? Do we all meet in Paris or do we meet in Tangiers? We got to get the hell out of here. It's a warning that to pay attention to the fact that in general, your variety is going to run out in a crisis unless you boost it. The whole idea of the boosting, the charges on a capacitor, your revolution has to have these variety boosters in them because the system trying to stop you will clobber your variety. And no matter what you do, you've got that negative exponential curve facing you until there are boosts that boost the curve back up. But of course, in the, outside of those discontinuities, those singularities, you've got a downward sloping curve.
Yeah, totally.
At least until the crisis is over.
Right. Because it'll converge on over eventually. I think this sort of stuff has really, I think, quite strong implications for like how we should even think about the possibility of emancipatory organizing in crisis or through crisis. Because this thing, right? So like your system will fall apart in the crisis unless it is being maintained by this like re-injection of energy into it. And like if you think of like organisms, they expend quite a bit of their own energy and their own structure on maintaining their structure. There's a lot of self-reference and there's a lot of like self-bootstrapping, continuous self-maintenance to make them still be stable. That's your viable system, right? But the thing being described here is a totally unviable system where it is fucking cratering. And crucially, it seems that one of the kind of big features of these kinds of crises is that it's too late for the thing to constitute itself in the crisis. And so maybe this is also why in what's left after crises is usually the most organized thing that's left. And it's like some, existing institution will be the thing that's left standing because it's the thing that already has the self-maintenance figured out. As Jake said in the comments there, it's like the military is usually the thing that's left standing because they're already the most disciplined. They were already the most organized before the crisis even happened. Whereas the revolutionaries and the sort of people who are contending are scrambling to make themselves become organisms, which seems to be, in this kind of analysis of crisis, just a hopeless race against entropy, right? Because if you're not already doing self-maintenance on this kind of level, you're not going to start doing it now. I suspect this puts a bullet in the head of a lot of theories of communization or whatever, where the proletariat will self-organize in the moment of catastrophe. All the evidence seems to point precisely in the opposite direction. That the things, the cybernetic systems that persist through and after crises are the ones that were already resilient enough to be able to overcome the crisis. And again, as Jake said, the military, basically, in all these cases. So does that mean that our challenge is to have preemptively built through proletarian organizations that are kind of on par with the military in terms of persistability, and to give up on riot our way towards communism? Probably, let's have some Matt and then some Jake.
Matt, my thoughts exactly. Actually, yeah, that all that spontaneity worship and stuff, that's all. And what's funny is I think it ironically will lead you to kind of the most authoritarian thing, just taking over. The party state wasn't the plan. It's just that the party was viable even after the Civil War, while the state that they built wasn't. You have to build these structures beforehand. Yeah, because once you're in there, you're kind of locked in. And and it is really hard. It's kind of fundamental to how the brain works too. They've done a lot of studies on how when you raise the stakes of something, experts tend to do better, but novices tend to do worse. Because pressure narrows the cues that you're attending to, and if you're really good at something, that's actually helpful because your brain actually knows how to focus on the things that are useful. But if you're a novice, then then you're even more helpless. You need to be really practiced before you go into the situation, so that you have that's also even what on an individual level. That's what military training is even for. That you have these instincts that that you can't really learn them on the fly. And really what you learn on the fly will actually probably not even be adaptive. And so, what you're saying about how you need these very strong foundations that then support flexibility. Or you have the equivalent. Otherwise, you would have the equivalent of something. At best, PTSD after a crisis, where you made some adaptations that you can't really undo, and at worst, just total loss of coherence.
Yeah, absolutely right. Totally with you on the practice thing, or the already being an expert. A well-rehearsed musician will deal perfectly well with dropping their pick on stage, or their guitar drifts out of tune, or they play a bum note or something. They can recover from that perfectly, but novices can't. A novice sort of garage band sort of thing will just fall apart as soon as something goes wrong. You need to already be good at it before the test, not during the test. It seems to be the kind of signal here, right? Okay, let's have Jake and then Jeremy.
Yeah, that definitely agree with all that. That's why the sort of idea of base building of the tactic forward of building the institutions and individual and institutional capacity of the working class to handle the problems that they face, with the idea that when things things will continue to get worse, right? It's not like things are going to get better just spontaneously, right? And so, yeah, the question is at what point are things bad enough that people want to do things about it, and that they have enough of this already practiced knowledge and knowledge and practice of doing things that running that would conceivably could be converted to running society before, and then while things get to the point, or once things get to the point where enough people are willing to say all right, let's try something different, what were you saying?
So I was just kind of riffing here. I think there's an intersection of two different things there. There's the necessity, and then there's capability, and I think so. The reason some of this spontaneity stuff has such currency in anarchist lumpen organizing sort of circuits is that they're dealing with people who've lived in squats for 15 years, and they're actually pretty good at looking after each other already. They are well practiced at riot medicine because they've been to a fucking bunch of them, but then it's misattributing the capability to say that it arises from the spontaneity. It arises from practice. You're dealing with a crust punk who's 46 years old, right? They've been around the fucking block a few times. So that's one sort of example. And I think the situation we're in now is that, by and large, the working class is not very, proletarians, rather than referring to the big group as if it were a single object. But proletarians are kind of really not great at looking after each other or organizing or whatever, because these decades and decades of atomization. But there is a necessity for it. But I think if we don't have capability, the escalating necessity will just lead to the clench reflex of just looking for a better Bonaparte. I think that the lack of capacity will make the necessity transmute into authoritarianism. People will swing right in the crisis if they're not capable of doing something else.
That's what we saw with Trump.
Yeah.
That was an attempt to do that.
Or even what's happening with Biden, right? They have this security state restoration thing going on as a kind of clench reflex to the Trump era and stuff. And I suspect that's the way that kind of intersection of necessity and capability will play out. And so the challenge then is to build capabilities and to build them with a better understanding than the crusties have of it, where they think it all arises from spontaneity, but actually it arises from having been lumpen for fucking ages, that's well practiced at that point, by the time you're getting to that.
Yeah, I think also the fact that that spontaneity, that turn towards spontaneity is a identification of a real issue, which is that the sort of I'd say the left, generally in the U.S. right now has been divorced from the kind of spontaneous fighting of the masses of the proletarian against the sort of horrors of the world, and it's we see those things in just the general occasional uprisings as they happen, whether they're connected to a larger movement or ideal, or if they're just Occupy Wall Street, which just happened and wasn't really part of a, it had ties to things that came before it, but it was a new expression of those things. And the question is, and I think the key is to not lose those ties, to not becoming unmoored from the working class and from the conditions that people face, because I think there's a tendency among people on the left to who recognize the need for things to change and want things to change faster than they are, which is obviously we all want things to change faster than they're currently changing. I mean, in the right direction. But the question is how to go about that. And I think for some people, there's the turn towards these existing institutions, we just kind of work within them or to reform them or whatever. And it's kind of the rightist deviation of that. And then the sort of more leftist, ultra leftist or whatever deviation of well, we have to organize for revolution, and what does that even mean? And that looks like copying tactics from previous attempts at revolution, and those are disconnected from how people see their ability to operate. People don't they don't see newspaper selling as this tactic that'll lead to revolution, but to the people that are kind of conditioned in that milieu, it's well, yeah, how do they not see it? It's just this is what worked in the past, and so it'll work now. It's just we need something that's different, but it's just it has to come from the people, because again, this sort of I'm something about the first paragraph, the last sentence of the first paragraph in 369 be like, the nuance can be projected into a sufficiently subtle language, but only if the variety is built into the transducer that will service the whole range of nuances from which this nuance is selected, which is a little complex. But I think what he's trying to say is that it's like, if the sort of nuance that you're communicating, the like, here's what's happening and here's what you can do about it, isn't connected to the sort of nuance that people experience in their actual life, like it's not, there's no institution or there's no method by which they can, like, you know, if the message being communicated is like, well, we need to overthrow this system, and there's no means by which they can overthrow the system, then that nuance is lost because it doesn't actually map onto anything in their life. So if there is something that, and obviously like just saying like, oh, we need revolution is a little like, it's not nuanced enough, you know, but like if there is like a communication of like, here's the sort of way that you can affect this in your life, and that thing by which to affect it exists, then that nuance communicated can actually translate it into like action, you know, that isn't just like lost in the sort of like entropic degradation of the system or whatever.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there, right? I think where we've gotten to with the like revolutionary left, and I say this as somebody who's emphatically pro-revolution, is that like I think a lot of the talk of revolution and like doing protracted people's war in fucking Ipswich or whatever is the one-bit communication channel that Beer is warning against. It is completely degenerate. There's no revolution's not on the fucking table. Like it probably won't be for another 200 fucking years. Like there's just no point in like alienating people right out the fucking gate by like telling them directly to their faces that we're fucking idiots. Which, how precisely do you build a fucking protracted people's war by just like acting like a goon all the time, you know? So like I think you're right. There needs to be a lot more subtlety. We probably need to really disentangle a lot of this like inherited reform versus revolution stuff. Because like I mean the insurrectionary revolution stuff is just not on the table, especially because nukes. Like you can just fucking carpet bomb your city into bits, and like that's the end of that fucking anarchist commune. And also, like, even the reforms aren't really on the table either. Like, we kind of have to like pivot out of the like two-dimensional grid into like the imaginary number space and like think outside the box, or like from the first fucking couple of pages, think again. Because we're in like the left is in fucking one-bit transducer land, where its message is just gone. It is melted into the fucking cosmic background radiation and just isn't being heard, you know. Let's get some Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the message "a better world isn't possible" is louder than the message "a better world is possible." You know, it's interesting. I'm still stuck on this idea of him calling it a negatively exponential curve. Anyone knows that an exponential curve with a negative exponent is called a decay curve. He's talking about decay. You know, it's like, this is the graph of when you have a microphone on and the sound goes away. You know, how the reverb diminishes down to nothing. It's asymptotic with zero. You know, but unless you have these signal boosts. And the signal boosts have to be part of the revolutionary strategy. You have to have the signal boost. You know, you can see some of the older revolutionaries groping at the concept. I mean, Mao certainly flirted with different kinds of signal boost, but he didn't have the courage to chase them where they were going to go. I mean, like 1,000 flowers blooming turned into something very repressive when those 1,000 flowers weren't spouting what Mao wanted them to spout. When you look at, like, for the very beginning of the Cultural Revolution, things like the Shanghai Commune are incredible high variety signal boosts. But again, it went in a direction that scared people and it crushed the variety. What we have to learn is that the revolutionary outcomes aren't going to be under our control, that we're steering the boat through the revolution rather than trying to control the ocean, you know? And, you know, I think when you talk about spontaneity, I mean, signal boosting, you know, variety boosting can be incredibly spontaneous. But the spontaneity is the tactic, not the strategy. the strategy should be the variety boosting. And variety boost, we should be constantly worrying about the diminishment of variety and how we can boost variety when variety begins to diminish. Because the more it diminishes, you either get counter-revolution or Bonapartism. I mean, Bonaparte is the quintessential expression of the revolution at zero variety, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely right. I don't know, I might have had a thought on that. That escaped me. Anyway, let's hear from Kyle.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the text very briefly and try to clarify what is being said here. So, in the top of 369, Beer makes the distinction between information and variety. And he says that the variety transduced is that variety and only that variety preserved at the output stage of the servo mechanism recently described. So that's capital F of A, right, is the servo mechanism. Nuance can be projected into a sufficiently subtle language, but only if the variety is built into the transducer that will service the whole range of nuances from which this nuance is selected. Okay. So, you know, like, it's great if you have high information, but if you don't have the variety to transduce it, then you're shit out of luck. Okay. And then it says, it is this fact that makes it unnecessary to distinguish between the transducers T2, T3, and T4. But doubtless the second expectation was that this little set is markedly different from the feedback transducer T1. And then he goes on to say that essentially, well, because the variety is on a closed circuit and it is dictated by the variety preserved at the output stage of the servo mechanism. And, okay, so first of all, yeah, these are all in the same circuit. Entropy means that they will tend to equate with each other, I guess, especially because the dictating factor is the variety of the servo mechanism and its output.
Yeah, because all of these are being tapped off of the output. So it's the variety of the output is the maximal variety that could feed back into T1 and could feed forward into T2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
So they can't really have different varieties.
Right. And then so he says, well, okay, so we get cohesion out of that because the feedback predominates, right, over the entire system. So that creates a certain amount of cohesion. But the problem is that variety tends to leak away unless it is specifically boosted, like a charge on a capacitor. So, yeah, the variety, like the first part of this section is saying the variety will tend to equate with each other at all transducers, or at all T points. However, the problem with that is that, like, this unity is a downside because variety will tend to actually leak away. So it's like, oh, you could have, like, you know, this really great T1 that is sending out a good message at the start, and that actually spreads thanks to this variety equation. But because of this degeneration, this variety leakage, it's going to get worse and worse unless it's boosted. Is generally the point here that he's making, right?
Yeah, I think I also take it to maybe my sort of way of understanding it was that even if you start out with a pretty decent feedback circuit with enough variety, because the runaway crisis, the the feedback circuit will tend to close in its variety. It'll tend towards 1-bit distinctions. It'll lose subtlety, but it's
Well, that's because of the leakage, right?
that's the leakage. But as that happens, its capacity to act will also decrease in proportion. So both the self-reflexivity and the capacity for action will tend towards zero in approximately the same rate. And that's because of there's no restoration of variety in the thing. So the leak, because I think one could read it as being
essentially like an organism that's starving. Right?
Yeah. Or I think an example I used, basically, right? Or an example I used earlier was if you could imagine a thermostat with, say, very rich sensors, like to within 1/100 of a degree, right? And its effector motors are very subtle as well. That they've really subtle like heating mechanisms. But now imagine that its internal feedback loop is losing capacity, like it's corroding. The silicon is wearing away, and it has like 4 bits of variety in its feedback loop. It will not be able to regulate the system, the heating system, because of the fault in its feedback loop. Or if you can imagine, again, as like if it was corroding, like the computer was burning away or whatever, it would, both its ability to regulate itself and its capacity to act, which are actually the same thing, would tend towards zero. So that, like, even if you have a lot of capacity for action in a material sense, like you have shit tons of material available, if your internal feedback loop is decaying, your capacity to act will also decay. Whereas one could imagine, contra beer, one could imagine the 2 loops decaying or boosting independently of each other. Like the action loop could be strong, but the feedback loop internally could be weak, or vice versa. And beer, I think, is saying no, they either rise or fall in lockstep. Like if you have a shitty internal feedback loop, there's no amount of material power that will make up for it. You'll just lose the capacity to act. Maybe, I don't know. Like, does anyone else have a take on that? Maybe Matt.
Yeah, so if I read it right, there's kind of 2 actions in play. Like there's an inherent leakage that you base it, that is kind of entropy always kind of getting the last word. Like you need specific anti-entropic systems that do take energy in order to fight that. And there's also how it particularly clamps down in a crisis. Well, with like the inherent leakage, I think you can see that in all kinds of stuff, like how like a monoculture in like a crop, where an ecosystem or a species that just has too little genetic diversity, and then they no longer even have the genes in them to adapt to a changing circumstance, and then they might even be adapted to what they're doing right now, but things change, they're fucked. And also this actually comes up in like machine learning a lot. Like there's this thing the vanishing gradients problem, and a whole classes of problems actually where the goal is actually you overfit something too fast, and then you actually can't even learn from new information. And so there's all these techniques, making neurons kind of forget connections, or like skipping layers in order to make sure that it doesn't learn the data so strongly that it's incapable of future learning.
Yeah, it's funny. There's Ashby came across very similar problems in his early valve-based machine learning things. That the circuits would become overfit, and they would kind of get stuck. They would be unable to learn any further. And the way to fix that was to jostle them with little electrical probes, just to reset some of the cells. And I think Beer probably, I think in some of these earlier chapters, especially when he has that little machine made of copper strips and things, and he has the example where, I don't know, you could end up pushing one of the dials so far that it fuses shut, and now you can't turn the dial back. Which seems to be big problems. The general problem being a process that converges on some sort of stable but degenerated stability, which, crisis annihilation is. You can blow up the fucking planet, and you end up with a stable system at the end. You might be stuck in an attractor that's dragging you towards that kind of fate. I don't know. Yeah. So that's that for that section, which I think was the section 3. I think next time we'll be on to section 4. The time cycle is synchronous for all subsystems. Do we have any closing remarks on this one? Or are we all fairly pleased?
We got through 3 pages today.
We're tearing through this thing. I think we can probably calculate the rate at which... Did we have like 30 pages left? Is that right?
Yeah.
Something like that. We may want to work on the pace a little bit, but it's fucking dense. It is very dense material.
I think it's useful. I'm getting
like I think we said in the before we started recording that some of this book and some of Beer's writing gives me the impression it was written during the daytime, like during work hours, because it's fairly well put together and it's well elaborated. But there's a lot of this that really seems like it was written at 3 a.m. with like just a load of whiskey, where it's like he's just spitting concepts. And I feel like the prospectus could easily be a book in its own right if all of this stuff was properly elaborated. But hey, we have to detangle this stuff. Let's see, Matt. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. First, I do want to echo that. Yeah, like this seems like it was written like during the flight from Chile. If we got a takeaway from this though, I'd say to all listeners, try and get involved in some local organizing, ideally with something with a direct impact. Just building those muscles and, just getting accustomed to, doing whatever, some kind of labor organizing, some kind of tenant organizing, canvassing for a politician or a single issue or something. Join an org, get plugged in. There's so much that's going on just by being plugged in at all. And just by participating in some kind of action at all. And you really got to do this before things start getting clamped, before, being a card-carrying socialist is illegal in some sense.
Yeah, you're going to have the left comms coming after you now. But yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, you don't get to be Metallica by not practicing. Like, you gotta fucking put in the effort, Kyle, go for it.
Sorry. I had a question and I figured it out, so it's no big problem.
Is it anything interesting?
Oh, I was just trying to understand, like, in the final part of this section, his comparison between the multi-node, right, the system 4 multi-node, I believe, chapter 14.
This is worth looking up, I guess. Chapter 14 starts on 201, so it's about System 5. I think I know what he's going to say. I think it's going to be the example where the executive asks 3 of his boys to make decisions, and then they ask 3 of their boys, and it's like really badly degenerated because the error signal is amplified, and that comes about by not allowing cross connections. But then he then proposes, like, what if you organized more like a brain and had cross connections that did error correcting feedback? You would get much more reliable signals. I think he might be referring to that model.
Yes, that's right. No, I mean, no, he's actually referring to the opposite. He's referring to the positive model. He's deliberately contrived and intended to aid as an aid to controlled decision. This is the positive example he comes up with, multi-node. The top-down hierarchy model is not the multi-node.
I know you're right. That's
right. And then so he's contrasting that to, in the current analysis, responsibility has been abdicated to an accelerating feedback loop, and the power to decide has been lost to caprice.
So the runaway feedback loop is not a multi-node.
It's interesting because you have multiple systems interacting with one another here, right? The different component parts that are being acted upon by this servo mechanism, A, B, and C, right? The A, B, and C parts. But that does not constitute a multi-node in the type that he was describing in chapter 14. And what we have here is this accelerating feedback loop where variety tends to degenerate and decay, as Jeremy said, and then this leads to reduction in uncertainty. Like, you know, as he says, the die is cast, right? Like, you cross the Rubicon and then that's it. So the prerogative to intervene through a failure to understand the cybernetics of the system. He's basically saying, if we did have a multi-node, we would be able to maintain a certain degree of uncertainty and therefore have more ability to intervene,
Well, I suspect
as opposed to being stuck into this fate.
Yeah. So I suspect that the difference that makes the difference is that the multi-node is interconnected in such a way as to reduce error signals. That it's like the way the brain is connected, so that it produces reliable outcomes from unreliable components. But these accelerating feedback loops are not. They're just accelerating, right? So I think what he's saying here is kind of like maybe another touch point is like it's very contrary to the kind of neoliberal understanding, right? The Hayekian, Landian sort of thing, where the like acceleration of the feedback loops is the sort of stand-in for the God brain, the multi-node, right? Of like social decision. And Beer is saying, no, because this thing isn't structured like a decision agent. It's structured like an attractor that drags you into catastrophe. And that those are different things. Like a multi-node is not just a kind of any big, messy, horrible thing. It's a big, messy, horrible thing that's connected in a particular way with a particular error-correcting behavior. And he is saying that in this hypothetical crisis scenario, if this was a multi-node, it would just stabilize.
Well, it's interesting because like error correction is a matter of information, whereas he's largely talking about variety here, right? What is or is not an error is a matter of information, not a matter of variety. Yeah, I mean, it suggests that like also the multi-node has a way of boosting variety. In addition to doing error correction. Because, you know, in a feedback loop is generally supposed to error correct. That is what it's supposed to be there for in a design.
But it's a difference between like a positive or a negative feedback loop, and that like a negative feedback loop will be kind of on error correction, but like a positive loop will shoot you to the moon, right? Yeah, and I mean when he's talking about feedback in the first part of the book, though, he's generally talking about the negative feedback loop that is providing error correction. And here he's talking about the flaws of that feedback loop, right? Like that it's not perfect in this kind of simple system that he's describing. So I'm quite interested to think about like, okay, well, going back to the multi-node, how does it both error correct and variety boost at the same time? Yeah, certainly. It'll be.
I mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, like, I mean, just being able to, like, you know, if you've got like 3 other people or whatever, like 2 or 3 other people that have the same information as you, just being able to bounce off, like, is this a good, like, this is my first impulse when hearing this information about what to do next. Does this make sense? And just that is enough to, like, you know, kind of bouncing it around in that like little back and forth of the multi-node is a helpful thing to make sure that you're not just like shooting off into the direction that you first think, oh, well, this might be the way to go with this particular, like, let's do like this because this happened. You know, it's just good to have that like other brains to be like, well, wait, what about this? Or like, what if we did this sort of less impactful thing that wouldn't introduce as much variety into the system that would still permit like the outcome that we want.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it, right? Is that like it's the way the brain is structured is that neurons can like check each other and stuff, and that's kind of like, I mean, if we flip to page 204 and we look at figure 40 at the like proposed like how organizations really work, it's deeply interconnected in a way that figure 49 is not. Like the regulator in figure 49 is all on its own. It has nobody to compare notes with. And in the absence of the possibility of re-injecting variety by comparing notes with another regulator, it's just going to crater because it can't be expected to survive on its own. Whereas in figure 40, we can imagine each of those numbered nodes as being one of these things, right, that are checking each other constantly and doing that brain-like behavior where you have unreliable components that add up to produce reliable decision. But it would be useful to revisit chapter 14 and get a real sense for, like, if this is the difference that makes a difference, right, between a degenerative feedback loop versus a multi-node, where one of them crashes and the other one could actually persist, then figuring out what the key differences really are would be important, certainly. Cool. Jeremy. And then we'll wrap up, I think.
I'm fairly influenced by Robert Anton Wilson, and one of his axioms is communication is only possible among equals. And one of the things about the multi-node is there's a lot of horizontal lines, and it was a constant refrain of Beer's that the more horizontality you have, like real horizontality, not on paper horizontality, the more communication takes place. And so, I think that's good.
So do you think that in this example we're looking at with figure 49, like implicitly, so we're looking at the feedback circuit for A, right? B and C and everyone else probably have their own circuits, but they're completely off the diagram. So that the building of a multi-node would mean connecting the feedback regulators for A, B, and C to each other so that they can compare notes. Would that be...
No, because those are inimical parties.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know what I mean? This is a war. This is a crisis. And A, B, and C are fighting over who gets to control the contested domain. So, information that goes from A to B benefits B and hurts A.
Okay, yeah, that is good clarification. I guess then it's a question of, like, how would A evolve so as to become more like a multi-node? And it would probably mean breaking. My instinct seems to be that it would mean breaking down this feedback loop into more of a nested VSM sort of structure where you have these stacked regulators that can cross communicate.
Or building the feedback loop as an OODA loop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Well, thanks everyone. This has been fantastic and illuminating as always. Let's pick it up next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Funny.
See y'all.